Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
Laws of nature govern everything in this universe. The sun rises and sets according to them. And neither the cycle of seasons nor ebb and tide of ocean waves can disobey these laws. These are laws that the scientists try to explain and strive to unravel. The law of jungle, raw in tooth and claw, prevails, where the strong prey on the poor, in turn to succumb before even stronger and more ruthless predators. Then there are divine commandments that prophets and priests communicate to their followers. Next come man-made laws, dictates of a sovereign who claim to rule by divine right. Laws too govern lives of men. Without the rule of law, only anarchy runs riot. With ascent of man from a prehistoric cave dweller to space explorer, the hierarchy of laws has changed. Today, laws made by elected representatives of the people on the basis of reason and with their consent occupy the pride of the place. The institution where this is done is the parliament, the pivot of democracy. The bill that evokes greatest popular interest is the annual budget. And understandably, as its provisions touch the lives of the common man. The secrecy and the drama traditionally associated with the budget presentation has contributed a lot towards a powerful mystique. In recent years, the process of budget making has become far more transparent, and many of the tasks performed earlier by the budget have now been appropriated by administrative orders and policy announcements throughout the year. However, this money bill occupies a unique position in our legislative process. This tends to distract us from the fact that the Parliament, in its routine work, deals with other bills and enacts legislations that are no less significant. Once a bill is passed by both houses of Parliament, it is sent for the assent of the President. In the cabinet system that India follows, the President can only delay the passage of the bill by withholding his assent for a limited period or referring it back to the government for reconsideration. If the matter has to be urgently dealt with, the government may request the President to issue an ordinance. This is normally done when the House is not in session. The ordinance retains its validity for a period of 6 months and lapses if a bill pertaining to its subject is not passed by the Parliament. While the excitement at the time of the introduction of the bill is understandable, it makes us forget that how much hard work has to be completed before it can be introduced.
Drafting of the bill actually is done in the government. Ideally and most usually, the concerned ministry, they prepare the draft bill. Then it goes to the law ministry. The law ministry vets it. Then there is interaction between the concerned ministry and the law ministry. Then it goes to the cabinet. After it is approved, then it comes to the Secretariat of Parliament, Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, whichever house they want to introduce it. It comes there.
Not only adequate notice is required, but also great care has to be exercised in drafting it. Inelegant or ambiguous language can mar the legislation with best intentions. Assistance rendered by specialists and officials in the law ministry plays a significant part in this. Similarly, the work that entails after the introduction of the bill tends to be undervalued as we focus primarily on the debates in the House. The debate is not confined to the chambers of parliament alone. In a democracy, the heated exchanges continue without its will. The forces arranged for and against a bill seek to build public opinion in their favor. Media is used and the public mobilized. The elected representatives cannot remain indifferent to this groundswell.
After introduction, the second reading stage, one choice is that it may be referred to the committee. Second choice is that it is discussed on the floor of the House. There is also a choice of referring it for eliciting public opinion. So it may be referred to the public at large for eliciting public opinion. It may be referred to a select committee on the bill, or it may be now, because with these departmental standing committees, it may be referred to one of these committees.
The debates within the parliament quite often reflect the mood outside. Quite often, the voting does not take place immediately and the bill is referred to a select committee for its consideration.
Further, to amend the Constitution of India.
Any legislation which is brought by the government before the parliament, it goes to the standing committee of the different houses, whether it is Lok Sabha standing committee or the Rajya Sabha standing committee. And the standing committee looks into that legislation, whether there is any lacuna or anything which has to be strengthened.
The role of Rajya Sabha in the passage of bills is very interesting. There are certain bills that can only be passed by Rajya Sabha.
There are certain legislation which only Rajya Sabha can pass. For example, the delimitation of states, only Rajya Sabha can pass because we are Council of States. Our endorsement is a must in that case.
This illustrates the unique system of checks and balances in our parliamentary democracy. No government can take it for granted that despite an overwhelming majority in Lok Sabha, it can get away its way if it does not have a majority in Rajya Sabha or the upper house.
I have a feeling that you need the upper house in India. More because in one house, our politicians can be very emotional. And if they pass laws under passions, it can be dangerous for the country. Look at the defamation bill. The government which has 402 seats in parliament, which introduced a malified emission, got it passed in 3.5 because of the majority, which is brute, could not introduce in the Rajya Sabha.
Part of democracy is that it will be an ongoing process, but there will be all institutions will be subject to certain outer limits, which they should not and cannot violate, and which means that they must also respect the functioning of another institution and the domain that is given to them. I think that's the code that the Constitution stipulates. Over and beyond that, certainly there will be revisions in thinking, there will be new issues and new interpretations will come, and that's something that is a subject of ongoing negotiation.
Although the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, this does not mean that it is written in stone or can remain static for all time. The members of the Constituent Assembly in their wisdom had provided for amendments in future as required by changing times.
संविधान का सबसे बड़ा जो प्रोविजन है आर्टिकल 368, ये मौका आपको देता है। ये संविधान हमारा स्टैटिक है ही नहीं, जाना जाए ग्रोइंग है। जैसे जैसे आवश्यकता होगी तो आवश्यकता आविष्कार की जननी का भी प्रोविजन है वहाँ। आर्टिकल 368 है, आप उसे सुधार कर देंगे, चाहे जुडिशरी के मुतालिक, एग्जीक्यूटिव के मुतालिक, पार्लियामेंट के मुतालिक, सब में आप सुधार ला सकते हैं, बिल्कुल जाना जाए।
A constitutional amendment requires specific formalities to be completed before bill can be passed through parliament and become an act. Nothing is more important than the integrity and independence of the nation. Ever since its birth, the Indian Republic has faced grave threats to its security. The Parliament, acutely aware of these threats, has given greatest priority to enactment of legislation to ensure the protection of national interest. At times, the security environment has deteriorated so fast that in an emergency-like situation, there has been no time to pass a law. In such situations, the President has been constrained to issue ordinances to cope with the crisis. Among this category of legislation, the most prominent acts are the Maintenance of Internal Security Act, popularly known as MISA. Other acts with similar aims are POTA and TADA. Introduction of legislation that seeks to prevent and punish in a deterrent manner terrorists has also made the constituent states apprehensive, as such laws give too much power to the centre at the cost of the states, while maintenance of law and order is a state subject in our federal polity. At the same time, no one can deny that the threats persists and there remains a need for laws to prevent terrorist activities and to bring to book those anti-social and anti-national elements that conspire to subvert our freedom. Although untouchability was abolished by law long years ago, the old mindset persists in some parts of the country and continues to oppress and humiliate the people traditionally stigmatized and socially discriminated. Though the schemes of reservations has enabled a large section of scheduled caste population to avail of seats in educational institutions and secure government employment, this has not eliminated social discrimination entirely. This was the motivation for enacting a law that would brook no lapse and mete out exemplary deterrent punishment to the violators. A law that would have far-reaching impact was the Untouchability Offences Amendment and the Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1976. The Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006 sought to protect the rights of members belonging to different scheduled tribes in a similar manner, particularly those who continue to identify themselves as children of forest. The Act attempts to balance forest dwellers' customary rights, which have been ignored so far, with economic and environmental objectives of today. Great care is required that while these people are drawn into the national mainstream, their traditional identity is not eroded and they do not lose their customary rights that are entwined with livelihood. This act provides a powerful tool for the socially discriminated to defend their rights. Women comprise half the population of our country and have suffered disabilities and deprivation due to traditional prejudice for a very long time. Various legislations have brought to restore the dignity of this segment of society and enable them to enjoy equal rights as citizens. Laws passed dealing with marriage, divorce and property rights, abolition of child marriages and crime against women fall under this category. An important set of law that provided much relief to women pertained to marriage law, like the Marriage Laws Amendment Act 1976. Dowry is a social ill that has had a pernicious hold on Indian mind. Social reformers have fought the social ill, but haven't succeeded in eradicating it. In the year 1961, the Dowry Prohibition Bill was passed by both the houses of the Parliament. The law prescribes strict punishment for those who violate it. Women, especially those belonging to economically weaker sections of society, are particularly vulnerable to exploitation. Girls and young women are often bought and sold by flesh traders.
Of all the criminals that are booked under the Suppression of Immoral Traffic Act, nearly 90% are women. There is a constitutional obligation, so far as the state is concerned, to stop trafficking completely, because one of the provisions in the Constitution debars trafficking in human beings.
Suppression of Immoral Traffic Act provides teeth to law enforcement agencies to cope with the problem. Children, it is said, are the future of a nation. It is a matter of concern that quite often children, the most vulnerable section of the society, become victim of neglect and are exposed to exploitation. They require special laws to protect them and ensure proper nurturing. The Constitution of India lays special emphasis on children and regulates the conditions of work of children in employments where they are not prohibited from working. A fresh impetus for children-oriented legislation was received in the year 1979 by the United Nations. The Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986 provides the mechanism to ensure this. It lays down enhanced penalties for employment of children in violation of the provisions of this Act. Child marriage are a plight that cannot be allowed to continue at any cost. It is unfortunate that customs and tradition continue to be invoked in defense of child marriages in rural areas. With a view to restraining child marriages, the Child Marriage Restraint Act was enacted in 1929. This act was amended in 1949 and once again in 1978. The National Commission for Women recommended that the government should appoint child marriage prevention officers. The National Human Rights Commission undertook a comprehensive review of the Act and recommended for comprehensive amendments. Constitution of India guarantees several rights to the children, including equality before law, free and compulsory primary education to all children. The crucial role of universal elementary education for strengthening the social fabric of democracy through provisions of equal opportunities to all has been accepted since inception of our republic. Over the years, there has been significant spatial and numerical expansion of elementary schools in the country. Article 21A, as inserted by the Constitution, Amendment Act 2002, provides for free and compulsory education of all children in the age group of 6 to 14 years as a fundamental right. The said bill was passed by both houses of Parliament and received the assent of the President of India on 26 August 2009. The Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan strives to attain this objective. Free and fair elections are the bedrock of democracy. India can take pride that it was the country that adopted universal adult franchise before many of the developed Western nations. With passage of time and spread of literacy, it was felt that there was an urgent need to reduce the minimum prescribed age for the voters. The various censuses held disclosed that an overwhelmingly large section of Indian population comprised youth. This generation matured earlier than its parents and felt restless as it could not participate in the democratic process. Rajiv Gandhi, the youngest Prime Minister of India, could foresee the advantages of harnessing this vast reservoir of power. It was he who inspired the crucial amendment of Representatives of People's Act that lowered the voting age to 18 and made the largest democracy in the world in one stroke also the youngest democracy at work. Ever since, the youth of the country has played a dramatic role in shaping its own destiny. Official secrecy is a legacy of the colonial rule during a period when bureaucracy was an agent and instrument of alien rulers and did not consider itself accountable to the people. Unfortunately, this mindset continues more than 6 decades after independence. Perhaps nothing has given the Indian people a great sense of empowerment as the passage of the Right to Information Act. It is also felt that now government officials, high and low, can be made immediately accountable and held responsible. And the recognition of the people's right to information that ought to be in public domain is certainly a revolutionary step to strengthen democracy. The first Supreme Court ruling on the right to information dates back to 1975. In 1997, efforts to legislate for the right to information at both the state and national level quickened. Eventually, the Shuri Committee draft law was reworked into the Freedom of Information Bill 2000. On 10th May 2005, the Right to Information Amendment Bill 2005 was tabled in the Lok Sabha. The Act formally came into force on 12th October 2005. Almost 1/10 of our population comprises of persons who are either physically or mentally challenged. They faced very grave difficulties in leading normal life unless special legal provisions were made to safeguard their rights. It is impossible for them to enjoy equality that is their due according to the Constitution. The Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities, Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act of 1995 may be considered a milestone in the legislative history of India and deserves full credit. The Act charges coordination of committees at the central and state levels to undertake various measures for the prevention and early detection of disabilities and creation of barrier-free environment. It also provides for education, employment, and vocational training, reservation in identified posts, establishment of homes for persons with severe disabilities. It has been a long-standing demand that to rectify the balance and give the women their due, there should be a legal provision to provide reservation of seats for women in assemblies and the parliament. The proposed legislation to reserve 33.3% seats in parliament and state legislatures for women was drafted first by the Devegola-led United Front government. The bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha on September 12, 1996. Though it has been introduced in Parliament several times since then, the bill could not be passed because of lack of political consensus. It demands reservation for women at each level of legislative decision making, starting with the Lok Sabha down to state and local legislatures.
मेरा मानना ये है कि महिला आरक्षण से एक महिलाओं को राह मिल जाएगी कि नहीं, यहाँ से उनको टिकट देना ही देना है। जिस तरह से सन 93 और 90 में हम देखते थे, जब पहला चुनाव लड़ा तो रिजर्वेशन पंचायती राज में आ गया था और सरपंच इतना घूंघट निकाल के सामने आती थी। लेकिन आज जागृति का ये आलम है कि वो मुंह खोल के आती हैं और अपनी बात को सशक्त रूप से कहती हैं।
If the bill is passed, 1/3 of the total available seats would be reserved for women in national, state and local governments. In recent years, quite a number of bills have been presented to the Parliament due to the pressure exerted by civil society. The Lokpal Bill to combat corruption is an excellent example of this. It has sharply focused on the role of civil society in participation in drafting of the legislation, on the sovereignty of the Parliament, and its exclusive jurisdiction to make laws. Another bill that has reached the House is the Food Security Bill. Ironically, in a country where vast stores of food grains are reported to be rotting in warehouses and millions go hungry.
Very many people's movements and social movements have been compelled to get the government to do certain things. For example, on, let's say, on the whole issue of food security. That's a very, very important issue, and there's been a major campaign for the past 10 years by various civil society organizations which have been obviously arguing, and quite rightly, that providing food security is the responsibility of the government.
This bill has attracted a lot of attention as it seeks to address the needs of the poorest of the poor and to restore public distribution system that was marginalized after economic reforms. The real India still lives in the villages and small towns and perhaps are the real custodians of the democratic process. Another interesting and significant amendment in the Indian Constitution has been the 73rd and the 74th Amendment.
Although the discussions went on for a fair amount of time, after all, if my memory is right, we started in around September of 1991 and didn't really complete our labors till the bills were passed in December 1992. We were committed to a cause, and it was a question of just adjusting perspectives on that cause. And I would say that eventually, in many respects, the 73rd and 74th Amendments were superior to the 64th and 65th Amendments.
Panchayati Raj institutions are a must for our democracy and development, and hence, devolution of more economic powers and resources to the Panchayati Raj institutions in order to render them financially autonomous and self-reliant is very significant. Panchayati Raj institutions are the basic unit of self-government and the base for the democratic and republican operations of the nation. In democracy, people are sovereign and are governed by the laws they make themselves. Legislative functions of our parliament epitomizes this sovereignty of the people. It is the bills and acts adopted by the parliament that express the will of the people and keep the spirit of democracy alive.